Hello, welcome to Performance Anxiety. We analyse the film, television, theatre and comedy performances that everybody is talking about. I'm Alex Dale, and with me is my resident film expert,
Dr. Maren.
On this episode, All Quiet on the Western Front. Written, produced and directed by Edward Berger. Starring nobody. Featuring Felix Kammerer, Albrecht Schuch, Moritz Klaus, Franz Müller, Adrian Grunewald, Edin Hasanovic. And co-starring Daniel Brühl and David Striesel.
Very nice. Good pronunciation there.
Thank you very much. It's been I've been working on it all week.
You have, haven't you?
I'm really trying my best here. All right. So what is our question about All Quiet on the Western Front? Why are we interested in it?
Well, obviously, it is a film that is now nominated for tons and tons of Oscars. But how can you have an Oscar-winning film without an Oscar-winning performance in it?
That's very interesting. Now then, just to give people a quick overview of all of those nominations. Yes, this is a 2022 German film, and it's currently streaming on Netflix. And it's in some select cinemas, I think, to be eligible for Oscars.
Absolutely, yeah.
It is nominated for Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best International Feature Film, Best Original Score, Best Sound, Best Production Design, Best Cinematography, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, and Best Visual Effects.
Wow, that's a long list of best of.
No mention of catering there, but I'm sure if that was an award, it'd be up there too.
Yes. So it seems to be a very, very, very good film.
People want to acknowledge the brilliance of this thing. Rightly so, I think, it's fair to say.
But it has no star performances in it.
Yeah, so this is the question we want to investigate.
Yeah.
And this relates to exactly the kind of movie that this wants to be and the story that it wants to tell. And it relates exactly to the idea of who you put in the roles, right?
Exactly. So here we have a film that is stylistically designed to portray something, and that has very much to do with how performances are used in this film.
So the producer has explicitly said that he wants this to be an anti-war film. So, well, even that is an interesting idea because as a genre, it took me by surprise, partly because everyone knows what a war film is, roughly. What does it mean to be an anti-war film? So I think we can get into this, and you can tell me I'm wrong as well. But I think that there's a particularly German sensibility about what it means to be anti-war. But I think more broadly and more importantly for our discussion is what it means to be anti-war is feeding into how this film is made and the artistic choices that are going into it.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the source material.
Let's do
that.
that.
So Im Westen nichts Neues. All Quiet on the Western Front was written by a former soldier, Erich Maria Remarque, a former soldier of the First World War, and it was published in 1928, 1929 as a book, and it...
Well, serialized in a newspaper, if I'm correct.
Yeah, but,
first of all.
So let's put it, but published sort of as a book in 1929. It was a huge success worldwide, and a year following, 1930, already the first filmic adaptation came out of All Quiet on the Western Front. It was a Hollywood adaptation which already won an Oscar for Best Film.
Interesting. Okay, so there's a precedent there we can refer to.
Yes.
So, first question, and a very obvious one, I think, is why do you think it's being remade now?
Well, let's stay back there.
Okay, please. Tell me if I'm off the mark.
So at the time, Erich Maria Remarque wrote his novel about his experiences of the First World War. He wrote at a time when he wanted to write about the experience in an objective way, what in Germany became known as die neue Sachlichkeit.
The new objectivity.
The new objectivity, where artists would divorce themselves from portraying emotions or feelings in their art and just trying to describe what is.
A very factual approach.
A very factual approach. And it chimes very with the kind of artistic movements in Europe at the time, which were different than the ones developing in America.
So already we can begin to see a divergence between European and American cinema in the 20s.
Yes, so or in dramatic storytelling. So
Okay.
that is not just stylistic, but also ideological.
Interesting. Okay, tell me
So
more.
in America, you would at the time you are developing what is now known as classical Hollywood cinema.
Right.
So the idea of a style, of a filmic style, that tells the story of an individual character.
So what we had in the 20s was really the setting the template for what we now think of as classic Hollywood filmmaking,
Yes.
which usually every Hollywood film is essentially the same, which is the story of one guy's transformation.
Yes. One guy's worst day ever,
Yeah.
and how he gets out of it.
Yes. So he comes in one state, he has a horrible time, and then comes out again at the other side.
Could be a woman.
Or it could be a woman. I say he in the broadest possible sense.
Yes.
But it's that transformative arc.
Yes.
And you can see that in every film is essentially that same
Yeah.
template. It's
So-
about growth and redemption and transformation.
Yes, and so the cinematic language that was developed to tell this story was what we can now call invisible cinema. You know, so you have shot and counter shot, you have a continuous timeline where you don't feel disorientated as a viewer because you're so continuously made to identify with this one person on their journey.
So it's invisible cuts.
Yes.
The cinematography doesn't draw attention to
Yeah.
itself at all. It's
Exactly.
all in the service of telling this story.
Yeah, it never disorientates you. So you've got shot and counter shot, and sort of everything's on this kind of eye line. So you never feel out of place. You always know where you are. The camera works in a direction that you can follow. You always know where you are in time and space, and if the character is progressing or regressing.
So the important thing here is that it's not the same in European storytelling, drama, film, literature, and so on.
No. The European experience is very much different. So if you look at people like Brecht, who wrote for the stage, he was very keen on the idea of not allowing for this kind of identification to happen. Yes?
The identification of you as an audience member with
Yeah.
the main protagonist of a story, right?
So the idea of catharsis is very much frowned upon. The idea of just feeling, right? So the idea of feeling is replaced with analysis in his dramaturgy. You know, you are exposed to the artifice of things in his method of alienation.
So it's not that you don't feel, it's that feeling in itself is not enough. You have to have some kind of intellectual stimulation or disorientation on top of that.
Yes, your feeling is not good enough to understand what's actually going on. It doesn't help you analyze things. On the contrary, it's frowned upon because it obfuscates the ideological reasons behind things. And simultaneously, in the Soviet Union, filmmakers like Sergei Eisenstein writes about this kind of alienation techniques in filmmaking through juxtaposition. So here, the shots and counter shots are not there to make you feel safe and part of the story. They're there to shock you and take you out of things.
They make you aware of the medium itself.
Yes, exactly. And he would insist that in filmmaking, you don't want to identify with a single person and their journey, because that is not how you can then analyze what's going on. You know, you cannot be objective about this. You know, you cannot be sachlich, in Neue Sachlichkeit. But what he insists of, who are the representatives in his films, are types.
Interesting.
So in his films, he insists on the idea of types, the same as Brecht. You don't have individual characters, but you have types that stand in for a group of people that you then can very easily recognize, but also categorize.
So if I remember correctly from my half-learned studies of drama and so on, the idea of something like the gestus, like very commonly recognized social interactions, archetypes, goings on that everybody will have common access to. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
Yes. And so now we have here Erich Maria Remarque, who writes a novel about four lads who are plucked from obscurity and thrown into the trenches of the First World War. So there's nothing about their history or their story. There's no journey in their lives at the front.
So already you can see how different this is from what we think of as what is contemporary Hollywood storytelling, where immediately you identify with somebody.
No, you have the idea of these four lads who are types, right? I mean, we still have the idea of types in contemporary cinema. Look at American high school films where
Yeah.
you've got the jock and the cheerleader,
The nerd.
the hot Asians. It's still it's a trope
It's there.
it's there. It does work, but here it is four guys that could be anybody. They could be your brothers, your cousins, you know somebody like this, and because you don't know their backstory, it doesn't matter, because the message of the film is that they don't matter. The individual does not matter. And this is what makes this film an anti-war film in the strictest sense.
All right, so let's get into this then. So what we're talking about here is the indifference of the war machine to subjectivity. Is that fair, or would you describe it differently?
So what makes this film an anti-war film?
In the kind of strict genre sense.
In the kind of strict genre sense, is that it demystifies the idea of the soldier as a heroic figure, as an individual who matters.
So it's really attempting to take to pieces a particular mythos, a particular romanticism around militaristic life and soldier and what it means to be a soldier. Right?
Yeah, so the idea that the fantasy that they are all instilled with at the beginning, so at the beginning of the film, they all want to go to war and become heroes and be remembered and matter. And as soon as they're at the front, it's over. They're nobody anymore. You can see this, the individual does not matter anymore. You are nothing. You are absolutely nameless.
You're cannon fodder.
You're cannon fodder. And it's illustrated in the way, this first scene where the jacket of the first kid who goes over the trenches, and the jacket is being recycled to then get to Powell Boymer, the sort of main...
The guy we follow through.
The guy we follow through. And he asks his superior, "Oh, there's still a name tag in my jacket," and he just rips it out and throws it on the floor, quite symbolically demonstrating that individualism and subjectivity, are a myth in warfare.
One of the themes that keeps coming up again and again is just how separate the names are from the bodies a lot of the time. So they snap a lot of name tags, they read lots of lists of people who've fallen, and it's just, there's no connection between any sense of individuality and you as a soldier and you as a fighting person, as a soldier, as a human being. It's just completely divorced.
Yes. So you as a person have no influence over the war. The war is not about you. And that's the myth an anti-war film tries to break. So you have, mostly in Anglo-American films, there's always a kind of redeeming feature about being a soldier. Either you're being remembered as a hero, or your life matters because, you win the war and something great happens afterward. And that is the actual myth that anti-war films want to break.
So it would be tempting to imagine that it's a German phenomenon, but it isn't necessarily, because there are also anti-war American films. For instance, Full Metal Jacket, you could say, makes a strong case to be an anti-war film in this very particular sense that you're describing. It's about the removal of humanity from fighting people.
Well, it's not just the removal of humanity, but the dissolvement of this mythos of a soldier, that soldiers matter in a war.
Right.
And that is kind of a distinct feature of this understanding of an anti-war film. So the idea of a war film where soldiers matter in the end, even though they sacrifice themselves, or they deliver a message, or, the side wins the war, there's always something redeeming about this. But the meaning of an anti-war film is that there's nothing redeeming about signing up to serve your fatherland in imperialist wars.
So how does this relate to the question that we're immediately interested in, which is the casting question?
Here we come to the fascinating moment where the performances reflect this kind of idea of non-entities, of humans as non-entities in war. 4 young actors who are not very well known. So we have no understanding of them as characters. They are just what we see. They're not laden with meaning for us.
So in the way we've always said, casting is storytelling, it's working for us again, but in entirely the opposite sense, in that we have no connection with these guys. Don't know anything about their backgrounds.
Yes, and that is really important, because if we know who these people are, if one of them was played by Tom Hanks, or
Yeah.
just Timothée Chalamet in the
Yeah.
in the role of Paul Bäumer,
Yeah.
it's already meaningful. But the point of the film is that lives are meaningless.
Right.
And individuals are meaningless. And this is why you have this beautiful performance of Felix Camera, who is this innocent face, who shows you in a very objective way, in this kind of Sachlichkeit way, just being at the front. There's no growth, there's no story, there is no redemption. He is just there as an object, not a subject.
So we don't know anything about his backstory. We're not interested, and we're deliberately not. All of that detail is withheld from us as a purely artistic choice.
Yes. And not just him, but also the other guys who are clearly people. They have got feelings and emotions, and they're shown in the film. But they are shown because they don't matter. And that's what makes it such a brutal film. And it emphasizes the brutality of the war machine, in that it takes away the humanity that these people obviously have.
So one of the interesting things about that, I think, is the way the film is made. A lot of the technical nominations recognize things like the cinematography and the production design. And those are elements which are helping tell the story in this particular alienating way that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And this is why I think why it's nominated for so many technical awards, because if you see the cinematography is phenomenal.
Well, I shouldn't use this word, but it is gorgeous. It's not the right word, but it's spellbinding, right?
It is spellbinding because, as you say, it really emphasizes this non-Hollywood way of storytelling. So what you don't have is like shot, counter shot.
Yeah.
On the contrary, you're disorientated all the time.
Yeah.
It breaks with the law of moving left to right for orientation.
Well, that was one of my favorite things about this. It was very disorientating, but deliberately so. So one of the classic tropes of Hollywood cinema, especially, is left to right action is good, because it's such a strongly established convention, whether it's reading direction or whatever it is, that's the case. And a lot of the time, they can be going left in All Quiet on the Western Front. They can be going left to right, but still losing, and everyone's still dying, and it's profoundly disorientating. Or they can be going right to left, and you might think that they're winning, but they're not. So all of those traditional signposts about what's happening are removed or deliberately played with.
Especially in things like where they have a dialogue with two characters.
Yeah.
It's very rarely this kind of shot, counter shot that orientates you as a viewer. Mm-hmm. It's usually people sitting next to one another, and it's filmed in this shallow focus. It's
another one of my favourite scenes.
Beautiful.
Where they're on the latrine and Powell, that's his name, isn't it?
Powell, yeah, Paul Bäumer.
He can read, his comrade can't, so he's reading the letter from his wife. And pretty much the whole scene is just a close-up on the other guy's face, but it's in such shallow focus that it's almost one plane of his face is in focus, and the rest of it is out of focus. But it's also, you can tell, a very wide angle. It's a very odd, because wide angle is traditionally deep focus. So wide angle, shallow focus is very strange, but it's all done to emphasize the kind of singularity of the subjectivities. But then, because those subjectivities mean nothing.
They mean nothing, and it is in the emphasis on this reaction shot on often Powell's face. This is why you need a performance that is that has no previous meaning.
It's a blank slate.
It's a blank slate. So Powell has to carry, or the actor has to carry the meaning of the film in his very youthful, innocent face.
Yeah.
It's often just his face as a reaction. So you don't see much of the cruelty. You just see his face as, exposed to what he sees.
Yeah.
And because it is a phase that has no meaning for us prior to this movie, it does work. It suddenly ladens this life that he has with all that he endures. And it is the tragedy that he has to suffer, the kind of dehumanization of the war machine. He means nothing anymore.
So, well, you could say, for the sake of argument, and I will put it to you to explore as an idea, supposing you were to cast a Chalamet in this, would that identification, that more easy identification with somebody you think you know more because they stand for something, would that not help tell the story more deeply because you have a more emotional connection with that performer?
Well, of course, that would be. I think that's the first script they wrote, wasn't it? Something like, and then the German producer says, no, you completely misunderstand the point of an anti-war movie. It's not the journey of a certain character.
Yeah, and that redemption.
Redemption. So it would completely, carry the meaning of the film meaningless.
It would nullify it.
It would nullify it as soon as you cast somebody in that role. Although Chalamet is probably a perfectly good actor, but because he comes loaded with meaning, and he means something outside the film, right? That completely would nullify the meaninglessness of the character of Paul Bäumer, right? So, but of course you do have a star in the film, which is Daniel Brühl. Daniel Brühl and David Striesow, who are quite well-known stars. Their storylines have been added on top of the original sort of plot, right? Their storylines are not in the book, they're not in the original film. And this is why the film has come under a lot of criticism because of these added storylines.
Okay, because it's not faithful to the source material.
Because it's not faithful to the source material, it seems to render the title a bit more meaningless,
Okay.
Because in the novel, Paul Bäumer dies about a month before the end of the war. And in the headline, in the newspaper headline says it's all quiet on the Western Front, as if, emphasizing the meaninglessness of what's happening at the Western Front. Of course, now they've added this kind of countdown timeline to the armistice, which, of course, now something's happening at the Western Front. It's not quiet anymore.
So the film needs at least some recognizable hook, some way in for people who are maybe more tuned into a Hollywood narrative, kind of.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, you need names like Daniel Brühl to actually get funding for a film like this.
So this is partly just a commercial
I think it's a commercial
necessity.
Yeah, and it's a commercial necessity. You will not be able to make this film that is necessary to not have stars.
Well, he is one of the producers as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's a film that's necessary that you don't have stars, but you have to have stars in there somehow. Yeah. And I think they reworked this a bit quite elegantly.
Okay, so it's almost like a stamp of quality a little bit.
Well, another thing is that 90 years of history have happened since the writing of the book and the first film. Mm-hmm. And another world war has happened. Mm-hmm. And so you cannot just ignore the history that has happened between, and that this whole thing happened again. Mm-hmm. Young German men, tried to become heroes at the front.
Yeah.
So, I think the storyline sort of tries to acknowledge what comes after with the mentioning of the Treaty of Versailles.
I see. So this is one of the plot strands, is that the Treaty of Versailles is essentially so onerous that it starts to already the seeds of the Second World War embedded in the end of the First.
Well, I mean,
which is historically true for one thing.
Because, the kind of right-wing voices in Germany at the time, they saw the capitulation of Germany as this kind of traitorous thing.
So Daniel Brühl is one of those guys.
Yeah, well, the real character was murdered.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was murdered by right wingers
for selling out Germany.
For selling out Germany, yeah.
Okay.
But so this kind of extra story arc is there for a reason, and I don't think it takes away from the meaning of the film as an anti-war film. And also the idea that the story has no stars.
So Steven Spielberg said that every war film is an anti-war film. And Francois Truffaut said that every war film is a pro-war film.
Well, he said there's no such thing as an anti-war film.
Okay. So do you think there is a legitimate claim for there to be a genre that is anti-war? Is this as close as you can
I
get?
think for me it is.
Okay.
I think there is the kind of idea of what does it mean to be anti-war? And there is a kind of very good case to be made in the desire to demythify a kind of imperial wars and the idea that it is a noble thing.
Yeah.
And
The kind of the idea of individual heroism as a soldier, and what a waste that is.
yeah.
All right. So to take this back to our original question, as we always try to do, can you have an Oscar-winning film without an Oscar-winning performance? Do you think that's possible, given everything we've said? And do you think it's going to win any of those Oscars?
Well, you can see people love this film.
Yeah.
And it seems to be because it takes us back to the idea of cinema. So cinema as a medium that has to tell a story, right? And this is why people, I think, are in awe of this film, because it works without these kind of tricks and nudges from Hollywood. It works as pure cinema.
So it's people like, or maybe I have to acknowledge the fact that it's not, this is the hero's journey all over again.
Yes. So I think maybe for some people who want to have this experience of the individual and their hero's journey, and
The more traditional Hollywood narrative.
and they find it very alienating to see a film like this that doesn't provide you with any kind of character with which you can identify with in this kind of way. There is no redemption. It leaves you completely in this world of nihilism.
Well, this is one of the things that I was wondering about, is this movie is obviously struck a nerve.
Yeah.
And I think more than just being an anti-war film, the idea that you are not the hero in your own story is a message for our times in some ways. We're living through a particular kind of moment of cultural disorientation, pessimism. Maybe there's something in this
I think that
people are identifying with.
I think the idea of cultural pessimism is quite strong at the moment. The idea that you are a cog in the machine.
Yeah.
Your individuality does not matter.
You are done too.
You are
rather than-
done too.
rather
You
than
are.
doing.
You have no agency anymore.
Yeah.
Because there is a political sphere that doesn't allow you to be an active political agent as such. So there is, I think, this kind of identification with this moment of, this is how the world works, and I'm just, I'm being done by. So maybe that's why it's so relevant.
All right. So you think maybe best screenplay?
I think it's going to win something.
It'll have to, surely. Yeah. So while I'm going to make a bet this time, I'm going to say that I'm going to bet that it wins best international feature film. I don't think it'll get the best film because it's too out there. It's too alien.
It is not American enough.
Precisely,
And they
yeah.
will. On the other hand, the first one won best film. Who knows?
But that was also an American film.
Yeah, exactly. It's non-American films don't usually win. Best film.
If not that, then best cinematography, because it is fantastic.
It is quite extraordinary, the cinematography. So yeah, I'm with you. It's they have to acknowledge that it is cinematic,
It's masterful.
Yeah, it's cinematic mastery.
Yeah.
And but it's not to American tastes, I don't think.
As always, thanks for listening to Performance Anxiety. We think the art of performance needs some love and understanding, and if you do too, please like and subscribe and spread the word. Until next time, bye-bye.